Hopefully everybody's in the right room. We're going to be talking about testing Asterisk. I know that might be a strange concept to the majority of people, but yeah. So what we're going to talk today is about writing a test for the Testsuite. And I have a couple quick slides, well, hopefully quick slides to go through. And then I'm actually going to show you some code. I'm not going to go through it all because there is a lot of stuff. But I'm going to show you an example of what we use today. And maybe I'll just ask for some examples from you of what you want to see. And maybe over the next week or so, I'll actually write something and maybe commit it or put it up, and you guys can take a look on how it's done. So basically, my name's Paul Belanger. I'm actually from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. I'm a remote employee for Digium. I started using Asterisk in 2003, primarily in a support role. So I'm always in the technical support, customer facing. I got to deal with the trying to explain to customers why development would go and break something, or how we did or did not test something. I'm sure if anybody's in a support background, they know exactly what I'm talking about. Mostly, like I said, I would find bugs, submit them up into Jira or Mantis, and now Jira, and that was basically my role in the community. Was I would find stuff, submit it up, and hopefully a developer would acknowledge it, write a patch, and then send it back to me, and I would test it and say, yeah, this works, no, it doesn't. One of the main, not one of the main things, but I do remember in Asterisk 1.6 when we were adding TCP support, I had a customer at the time that was integrating into Microsoft Speech Server, and that's only SIP over TCP. So I spent a lot of time testing that, and yeah, there's a guy shaking his head over here like SIP over TCP. But yeah, spent a time testing that, submitting it, and it worked quite well. So I'm actually relatively new to Digium. I was hired after last year's AstroCon by Russell, who's no longer here. So we're going to pour a 40 in his honor at the end of the talk. And that's for you, Russell, if you're watching. Basically, I'm the primary maintainer of the Testsuite. So that's my job at Digium, is to write tests, code. If something breaks, I'm the guy that goes screaming to developers because the tools scream at me that something's broken. So if you watch the dev list and you see these kind of funky email headers from Bamboo, and there's some comments, they're usually from me saying like, this broke. And you guys only see like a fraction of it. The stuff I get is like 20 emails. And then there's internal bots and so on and so forth. So basically, here's the overview. I'm just putting it up there so you guys can see what we're going to do. So a couple questions for you guys. I mean, who has production systems? Hopefully everybody. If not, I mean, you want to put in a production system. You have customers that have production systems. Now, of all the people that put their hands up, how many of you have actual test environments for that? Oh, okay, impressive. So you guys tend to test on your test environments, or you just kind of make a change in production and cross your fingers and hope it works, right? The second, yeah, trust me, there's a lot of people that do that. This is more of a question for you. What's your change management process? Hopefully you do have a series of either tests that you go through, or procedures, rather than just downloading the latest version of Asterisk and cutting it in 20 minutes, right? Because I don't know why, but people seem to think that Asterisk is different than like Apache or Microsoft Windows desktops, or that, oh, I'm just going to cut this down and just download the latest, and yeah, my customers are going to love it. And 9 times out of 10, we get the guy on the mailing list. It's like it's broken, and we're like, well, did you test it? And they're like, no. So yeah, so it goes into my next one is, how do you use Asterisk? Is the released tarball version that you're directly using, or are you backporting custom patches? Again, hopefully you have a testing process for that. And then finally, like I said, what is your testing process? Is it manual? Is it an automated process? Or is it a combination of both? the majority of people, it's just a manual process. For those people that have an automated process, I would love to come talk to you to hear what you're doing. There was a gentleman before that was saying that they have some sort of Java implementation that they use to do testing, which, you know, is whatever you guys are accustomed to, you know, that's fantastic. So what is testing? You know, it's kind of a big deal. You know, that's kind of the running joke that we got. It's a kind of a big deal. And, you know, it's something that Digium does. But at the same token, we don't test everything, you know. I get paid by Digium. I work 40 hours, you know. I could work 80 hours if I really wanted to, but I'm not getting paid for it. And my wife would shoot me, right? So everybody, like I said, everybody has customers. Everybody wants to keep their customers happy, you know. So I'm not sure how many people were running 184 recently, or were a couple months ago, and had a Cisco phone. I'm sure you all heard that 184 kind of broke Cisco registration, and there was this huge outcry from the community of how could this possibly happen? And there was a couple blogs that started talking about, you know, does Digium actually use Asterisk or eat their dog food? I mean, Ward Monday, I'm sure you all. And he actually brought up some valid points. You know, I could appreciate what he's saying, but at the same token, we roll release candidates of Asterisk. So my question back to anybody who was complaining about it was, well, why didn't you find it? Because we do, every release, we create release candidates. And if you would have just installed it and did an upgrade like you did on the production side of the release, you would have seen that it was broken. And then you would have hopefully talked to a bug marshal like Life or myself or whoever and say, hey, this is broken. But basically what it came down to, it was a lack of communication. And, you know, something that came up was, you know, does Digium test with Cisco phones? Well, the reality is no. Like, all the phones we have are, I think, Polycom. I mean, like I said, I'm remote. We do have a couple Cisco phones, but that requires somebody going and picking it up and dialing it each release. And it's not a very efficient process. So and to go on my next point, it's something that the community does. Well, we hope it's something the community does, but the reality is somebody may do a test, like you guys had your hands up. You guys may have a test that you do, but I don't see that publicly, or nobody knows, like the guy sitting next to you, you guys might be doing the same test. So, but you don't know the results of each of that. So some of it might be proprietary stuff, but the majority of it is like testing chance SIP. Does the registration work? Or does the conference pin on conferencing work, or Meet Me? And then just the last one is it's something you do, and that could be a manual process every time, dialing, transferring, or it could be an automated process like the gentleman with Java. So the history of it, basically 2009, Matt Nicholson created AST Test, which is something he just did out of his own need for it. And basically it's a Lua-based application, and it would launch an Asterisk instance with some default configuration files, and then you would write what you wanted to do in Lua. Now, it really didn't have any direct Asterisk integration. Everything was done in Lua, and then it wrapped around and created the Asterisk stuff. So that was basically the first iteration of it. And then, you know, sometime after that, you know, the initial import of the code for the Testsuite was done February 3rd by Russell Bryant. And basically, like I said, or like he says, you know, the rapid growth of Asterisk development was far outpacing the existing approaches to testing, which at that point in time was manual, picking up a phone, dialing, transferring. I mean, it takes a lot of time, not only to set that system up, but then document it, and then we do a release, and, you know, hardware's limited, so you tear it down, do another one, tear it back up. A lot of man hours wasted. And basically, I talked to him yesterday on IRC about it, and if I understand correctly, he just went to other other companies and just asked them what their testing practices was. And it was kind of launched at that. He became interested in it, and it's just something he just started doing. And basically, once he started doing it and started making it public and open, then internal Digium took notice of it and started committing resources to it because they seen the value in it. And then basically myself, I wasn't working at Digium at the time, and kind of stumbled across this one day, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. You know, the stuff that Russell's doing, which is written in Python. You know, I'm not strong in Python at this point in time, and I'm not, not saying I'm strong at it now, but I'm like, wow, this is really cool, you know. Wonder if I could write a test that will load a module and then unload a module and hope Asterisk doesn't core dump. Because there was something that I was working on, because I would load ChanEx and unload it and it would just core dump. So that was basically my first test, and it took a while to do it because the back end of the Testsuite really didn't exist. So as the months continued on this test, I started writing some code and contributing it back into the Testsuite. And like I said, from April till this time last year, Life and Russell kind of took notice, and Russell pulled me aside and said, listen, we need a guy to do exactly what you're doing. Do you want to do it? And I said, yes, please. And that's what I've been working on in the last year. So it's grown tremendously over the last 20 months from something Russell did at his desk to now we have like Matt Jordan in the back. He's at Digium. He's there for 3 months, and he's already working on some pretty cool stuff to detect core locks and memory leaks and all the tools in Asterisk, but we're automating it. It's kind of a pain right now because of we put it in and we think everything's working great. We put Matt's stuff in there and we're like, wow, there's threads just hanging around here doing nothing, or there's locks on something totally different that we're not testing. And you're like, wow, so he's been doing a lot of work with voicemail, and it's pretty interesting stuff. So types of testing, we got unit tests. I'm not going to really go into that. That's stuff that a developer would do, and those are in Asterisk. An example is we have a unit test to parse SIP registration, SIP registration strings to convert what you put in sip.conf into Asterisk in hopes that your UA would register properly. And then there's some voicemail stuff that we test in Asterisk. Excuse me. Manual testing, touched on it, very time consuming. You might do it for the first 4 or 5 times and be like, yeah, I'm really into this. The 7th time, things slip, you forget, you take shortcuts. It's not always 100% path. And then there's the Testsuite that we're talking about now. It's external, it's automated, multiple Asterisk instances. I think there's a couple that are 3 instances of Asterisk, and they're transferring calls between them. In-band, DTMF, blind transfers. There's conferencing one, voicemail. We use Asterisk as a dialer, which I'm not a fan of, but we just do. And that's really geared toward Asterisk users. So we're looking for people who have customers or who want to write something. That's where the Testsuite is focusing on. So some of the tools that we use is obviously the Testsuite. This is the subversion URL. We also interface with SIP-P. It's kind of ugly, but it works. We basically spawn a process to use the binary. We use StarPy a lot. StarPy is a Python library written on top of Twisted. I mean, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with Python, but that's primarily what it's written in. StarPy, we actually maintain it now. Digium, or not necessarily Digium, but the community, we moved it to GitHub to continue development of it because the original author, it was there, but there was some problems, and he had moved on to something else. And then we also use PJSUA. Again, we use the binary directly, but there are Python bindings we want to get into to actually create SIP clients to use rather than testing direct Asterisk with Asterisk. And then we also use Bamboo, asterisk.org. This is our continuous integration tool that basically monitors all the branches, everything from 1.4, 1.6.2. We still monitor those because technically we do security releases. 1.8.10 trunk, and basically each commit we do into that branch, the test suite goes out and spawns a bunch of these tests. So, hopefully my email doesn't open. If nobody's ever been to it, this is kind of what it looks like right here. So you can see this is SCF utilizing it. Let me get this out of the way. This is SCF. They use it to part of their tools as well, but these are all the branches. So 1.4, 1.6.2, 1.8.10 trunk. And you can see in trunk, we use a base OS as Ubuntu Lucid, Ubuntu Hardy, Snow Leopard, FreeBSD, Debian Lenny, and CentOS. So every time a commit goes, based on some logic, is if the Lucid one passes, which is green, and as you can see it's red here because of there's one failure out of 175 tests. That's both unit tests and Testsuite tests. So I encourage you to kind of go there and see what's going on. But yeah, it's kind of a great tool. We'll probably actually be changing that to once a day rather than each commit, just because of the stuff that Matt's working on. Right now it takes about an hour to run a test for each commit. I'm sorry, to run all the tests. The stuff Matt's doing is we're envisioning 8 hours of just tests going. And because of all the stuff that we're testing against, we're tracking, we're trying to monitor, and so on and so forth. So how do you configure Asterisk? Well, basically, if you don't know, there's a development mode flag, configure enable dev mode. You want to menu select, you enable under the compiler flags, you enable the test framework. You can enable the test modules, those are the unit tests I was talking about. And then you make, compile, install samples, you do some other stuff, and hopefully you profit from it. But that's not usually the case. So, writing a test. I mean, how am I? Before I get in there, is there any questions so far? The previous one? Oh, I kind of skipped over something. Yeah. Yeah, I'll publish this all after the talk. Whoa, what's going on here? Okay, yeah, so you configure Asterisk, you install it. How to actually install the test suite? You actually need to install it into the source directory of Asterisk. This is kind of a limitation the way that we do it, but that's the way it works right now. So you check it out into the local directory, and then you go into it and start running some tests. And the only reason we do that is because we look at some header files to determine Asterisk versions. It's not the best way to do it. I want to change it so we use the binary directly, but that's just the way it is. And like I said, it's written in Python, so you need the YAML library. That's the primary configuration for it. And then you need Twisted, the protocol Twisted. I'm not going to get into this. I mean, it's its own presentation in itself. But we utilize Twisted a lot. That's primarily. Now there's internal talks of if we're going to change that or not, but there's kind of some limitations the way that we use it. But basically, it's this reactor that just kind of keeps running in the background, looping, and you attach to it and have callbacks and so on and so forth. So again, any more questions before I go in? Yep. Right now, yeah. So yes. So the way that I envision it working in the future is the test suite is smart enough to determine what branch or which version of Asterisk you have, and kind of pre-sandbox it for you. I mean, there's a lot of information I can't get into just because of time, but I'm more than willing to talk to you guys about it afterwards. But we basically, the user compiles and installs Asterisk at the OS level, and then when the test suite runs, we will sandbox individual instances of Asterisk based on symbolic links and so that if you run all your tests and one fails, you can kind of go back to that single instance of Asterisk to relaunch it and just see what's going on. And we document everything, like log files, AMI output, lots of information, debug threads if it's enabled, core dumps. So lots of information, but like I said, it's probably 2 days worth of talk just to kind of bring everybody up to it. So writing a test, again, this is going to be kind of high level stuff, but we'll go into it. In the source tree, there's a README. That's kind of the key place right now to get information. Talks about how to install it, what you need, dependency libraries, how to compile it. Like I said, you have SIP-P, PJSUA, Twisted, StarPy. Most of that is automated. We need to do a better way of improving the dependencies. It's kind of the first time you set it up, it's really, if you don't know what you need, there's no configure script, so you have to manually know what goes in. Want to improve that, so there's similar to Asterisk, a configure script to determine if you have it in, and then enable and disable functionality. Wiki.asterisk.org, another place. I have some stuff that I still haven't put up there yet. I should have put it up before I left, but basically talking about how to write a test, kind of this talk, and then going into breaking it down to what functions do what. But one of the things that I made sure we did before that was utilize DocsGen. Now, we already used the inline Python documentation. I think it's, somebody help me out, Python docs or something, I'm not sure what it is, but Python has its own internal documentation language. We just added the configuration for DocsGen to parse it. And basically, come on here. Again, it's not on the web. This is local to my laptop. You make docs, everything's there, and you can see like just the amount of classes of documentation. I mean, there's a lot, and I'm just going to scrape the top of it. We have classes for everything for SIP dialog, test conditions. This is stuff Matt worked on. Determining Asterisk versions, CDR-specific tests, configuration file tests, parsing them, SIP-P, voicemail. I mean, there's lots of stuff, and they all kind of revolve around the test case class. And this is where we take on all the responsibility of creating Asterisk. And that's where I was talking about sandboxing the instances. You can create fast AGI factories, which is if your test is going to utilize fast AGI. We go out and kind of create all the server for that. If you're going to use the AMI to log in and run some commands like originate or listen to events for faxing to see if it's successful or failed, we take care of all of that. And, you know, it's all documented in here. Yeah, like I said, there's lots of stuff to kind of go over. And then, of course, Asterisk testing. So aside from myself, I'm kind of really before joining Digium, I was the only guy that wrote a test. Now, most of it's like outside of Digium. I'm trying my damnedest to bring somebody into the fold just to learn it. We had somebody, Acid Foo, I think that's his name. He just started, he wanted to write something for SCCP, I think. And he was using it more for an internal project, but I think we spent 2 or 3 days just working with him directly to, you know, get him involved. And I've had conversations online where people are like, well, why doesn't Digium test it? And I'm like, well, we have tools. Why don't you tell me what you want to do and we'll show you how to do it? And then, you know, there's no response. So, I mean, after this, if you want to join Asterisk testing, or if you have an idea of what you want to do, you don't know how to do it, talk to me now, talk to me in IRC. I'm more than willing, even personal time outside of Digium, to, you know, get you up to speed, get it going, because I want you to submit your tests to us so that we run them every commit. And so we get more code coverage, more testing coverage. And if something breaks, I mean, it's fantastic. It benefits you directly, but it also benefits the community directly. So yeah, so basically, before I get to the questions, how am I doing on time? I got about 10 minutes, I think, 15 minutes. Any questions so far? Yeah. Yeah, I didn't put it up. There's a mailing list for the results. That's called test-results. And that has everything for the last 18 months. We kind of lost the first half because of bad backup procedures, and we just started again. But you can go back. I'm going to create a little wiki page that actually shows examples of how the Testsuite found problems. I don't say we find a lot, but in internal software development chatting, something will break before a release, and I'm like, yay, it broke something. The developer's like, oh crap, I got to fix it. But I'm like, hey, look at that, it works. And 9 times out of 10, it's not even related to what you're testing. So the last one was something to do with originations, I think, and it completely broke our fax tests. And I'm like, how did that happen? And it was just under the way we were using it, Asterisk just crashed, null pointer or something. And it was just great. It was like, yeah, it works. I mean, it was terrible because it happened on a Friday, and it wasn't until Monday until we fixed it. I had like 200 emails because people were still committing. But yeah, it's pretty cool when something breaks. So, I mean, I'm cynical that way, but yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's a good question. So the question is, how do we make sure instance A of Asterisk doesn't, collide with instance B or even instance C? Some stuff, the Testsuite deals with that. For example, manager. We utilize a lot of include statements, and that's only because we want to, test include statements at the same time. So I'm sure there's better ways to dynamically create configuration files on the fly, but that's outside of Asterisk. So a lot of it is the Testsuite has its own base configuration files, and like I said, when we sandbox, we kind of copy in some baseline stuff, and you can override it based on include files. But to the answer to the question is we don't do a good job at it. So there are some tests that will fire up. So we're testing fax across SIP. We will launch instance A, which has eeks, which by default binds to everything. Instance 2 comes up, eeks fails. We don't care that it fails because we're not testing it. So talking with Matt about it earlier is we need to do a better way to actually make sure that we only, eeks should really bind to a virtual adapter, and that's basically what we do. We bind to virtual adapters, and if we have multiple instances, we just increment the virtual adapter because we have like a class A, class A of IP addresses for virtual adapters. Now that problem actually creates is FreeBSD handles it differently than Linux, than OS X and all that good stuff. So that's its own problems in itself. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so here's a little example. Can anybody tell me what it does just by looking at it? Well, anybody but life? Yeah, so here's a simple test that we do to see if we can actually log into AMI based on a user that we've created in our manager.conf file. So basically, this is our main function. Here's the class from above. You can see my cursor, right? Yeah. So we start Asterisk, which, like I said, sandbox it. We utilize a wait for, what's it called? Wait for boot, I think. There was an event created which indicates back over the AMI that, hey, Asterisk is done loading. And then we run the reactor, which is, like I said, for twisted. And then we stop and we validate the test. But when we run, we have to overload the test case, which it has some default stuff for establishing AMI and so on and so forth. And then we create our AMI factory, which again goes and tries to log into the AMI. If successful, it creates a callback called AMI Connect. And then we can do some other stuff once we're connected to the AMI to originate calls, to monitor events, and so on. But in here, we basically want to see if we can get this callback, which we do, and we just basically add a callback to log off. And if we can't log off, we throw an error. And basically, if we log off, we pass the tests, we stop the reactor, and it's successful. So as basic as this is a simple way to make sure that we don't break the manager, the login functionality. Now, I mean, you're looking at it and going, wow, this is a really basic test. Thanks for writing it. But a lot of people use the manager, and a lot of people use the AMI. So we never have to worry about breaking something here on every commit because this test gets run. Now, there are conditions where this test fails, and it's maybe because Asterisk doesn't load properly because of something else, and Asterisk is core dumping. This test won't tell us that, except it can't log into the manager. So that's where there's a little bit of maintenance or burden on the maintainer of this to try to establish where the problem is. And that's something we don't do a good job at yet. I mean, one of the problems we have internally is bouncing tests because everything's kind of timing based. So on your desktop, you might have the timing down perfect. You know, dial, wait 5 seconds, pass some DTMF, wait 10 seconds for the other side to hear that, send something back. That may work perfectly on your desktop, but we run these in VMs or we run them on some slow hardware. We really don't care of the CPU processor speed or memory speed. We want to adapt to that so that it just works. And that's kind of the problems we have right now is we have tests that fail. And we specifically, I can tell just by looking at it that it fails because of timing issues. Because there's wait 10 seconds in a dial plan for something to happen. And if it doesn't happen, it just stops. So Matt's done a lot of good work on adding some actual custom AMI events into voicemail so that when voicemail is playing a prompt, we now, once the test framework is enabled, we'll spew some events to the AMI that's saying, hey, we're playing this prompt. And then we can hook into that and say, hey, the prompt's playing, let's send a DTMF. And then the event will be like, hey, we got DTMF. Okay, let's do something else. So that's going to be a lot of work adding that stuff into Asterisk without affecting production systems, because production systems don't care about that stuff. It's for your testing, right? So we had to talk about it on the mailing list. Nobody objected to us adding code into Asterisk that was defined when the test framework was enabled. Nobody had a problem with that. You know, us adding stuff into Asterisk directly, there's going to be people with problems with that. So, like I said, this is just a simple example. We have a ton of tests. Manager, SIP TLS, mix monitor, EEX, direct pickup, dynamic modules. That's the one that I wrote. Let's see what I did here. So we load some modules. We go through the CLI. We check failures, and it's kind of ugly. You know, it shouldn't be hard coded in here, but it does the job. And we throw some warnings, and most of the work is actually defining what your test wants to do, what the criteria is. Like I said earlier, if you went and did that, if you went and wrote what you wanted to do, how it's supposed to work, what your criteria for pass is, and you even submitted that back to the community, that would take somebody who knows Python maybe better than you to go out and write it, and it should work or it should fail. So, I mean, excuse me. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Is like, if you're interested in writing testing, like, let me know, let Matt know, let anybody in the community know. I'm more than willing to spend personal time to get you up to speed and start submitting them in. I mean, in theory, this is a project outside of Asterisk that's trying to utilize Asterisk to make sure Asterisk is better. So I think I'm right on the wire, so if there's any questions.